Hi, this is the Democratic Alliance Labour Report. We've had a break for a few weeks and thank you for bearing with me over that break. There have been some interesting labour issues that have played out over the country over the past few days, few weeks, few months. We have an interesting time. This is Sunday, the 3rd of October 2021, and I thank you for tuning in. We're about to embark upon a massive strike in the steel industry. There have been wage negotiations been going on for months. And of course, we have many industries that, although the wage negotiations started way back in June 2021, many of those industries haven't settled their wages. We're in for interesting times. Despite the enormity of our problems, the enormous unemployment that we have, they are still demanding much higher wages than we had over the pandemic, obviously, whereas last year many of the industries didn't get increases. The wage demands are now pretty harsh. People might have seen the recent quarterly report, the Labour quarterly report. We've got more unemployment in the country. Last time I left off, I said we're the worst unemployment in the world. Well, it's getting worse. So a little bit about the Groucho Marx story where they told him not to worry because things could be worse. And he said, and sure enough, it did get worse. So here we are. We're on the cusp of a local election, which is on the 1st of November. I'm hoping everyone goes out, just make your mark, vote for the Democratic Alliance. At least we run the cities, the municipalities properly. There are little issues that need to be sorted out. And this gets pointed out to me by voters and activists, but we are still the only party that can actually run a municipality properly. We're the only municipality that is able to keep it solvent and to still have jobs growth like we're seeing here in the Western Province. So please come out. Every single vote works. The trade unions are looking to cause as much trouble as they can. I'm going to quote quite a bit now from Consortium, just to show you about some of their disquiet that they have with the ANC, which is interesting. It's the first time we've seen it. I found it very interesting to read the introductory remarks made by the leadership and the General Secretary of Consortium a week ago. I want to quote from that speech, if you don't mind. I'm sorry I'm reading out. He said, and I quote, "The challenges are steep. The economy is bleeding. Many organs of state have collapsed or are falling apart. Billions are lost to the fiscus due to corruption, wasteful expenditure and tax evasion. The credibility of government and the ANC is battered. We are all disappointed with the behaviour of many of our comrades in government. The EFF has established a labour desk and sought to enter the workplace and displace trade unions. Let us not be complacent about organising, servicing and representing our members. We cannot be found to be wanting. Many state-owned enterprises have collapsed or are collapsing. Local government is in deep distress. Many companies have closed down." That's a quote from Consortium's leadership. This is probably the first time that I've seen anyway that Consortium is recognising the dire straits that we're facing, and of course indeed is recognizing that the tripartite alliance is in trouble. Not might be in trouble, but is in trouble. I can't understand why they're still supporting, because Consortium supporting government at the polls doesn't make sense when they said this. There's also been another statement from Consortium, and I'm going to spend a bit of time on the Consortium Statements because they're still the biggest trade union umbrella body. And I quote again, "Consortium is deeply disappointed that the President did not mention the failure of the UIF to roll out relief to thousands of workers still waiting for the long-delayed relief from level 4. Remember, that was March 16 to June 25. As well as more recently, the July violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. This is an unforgivable delay to thousands of workers on the failure of the part of the UIF that needs to be addressed now. The Federation will be requesting a meeting with the Minister and the Director General for Employment and Labour to fix this inexplicable crisis. Workers deserve better." Signed by Consortium. So now again, you see that the remarks are now attacking the UIF, the minister. We've got real problems. And when Consortium is attacking them, you can imagine the thoughts that are going through society as a whole. I still to this day, after 10,000 emails, still to this day, have problems with the UIF and the department, and of course workmen's compensation. During this period, we've also had an invitation for written representations to the investigation into the national minimum wage. I don't think many in the public have written into the department about that investigation to the minimum wage, but we're probably going to have an increase to that minimum wage. Despite all our woes, we're going to have an increase. I look again at another press release made by Consortium where government said they had failed to pass the Employment Equity Amendment Bill. To my mind, that was quite an exercise. I was in Parliament on that day. In essence, there weren't enough members of Parliament present or on the virtual platform to vote in favour of these amendments. And they stated, Consortium stated as follows, and I quote, "This is an indictment on all political parties and their leadership in the National Assembly. The ANC on its own can provide the necessary quorum for the National Assembly to vote and adopt legislation. This reflects leadership and ill discipline amongst the ANC caucus in the National Assembly. The leadership of the National Assembly needs to get its house in order, to urgently reconvene the National Assembly and ensure that members of Parliament do what they are paid to do by working, for example, attending sittings and vote on legislation that will improve their lives. Parliament must apply the principle of no work, no pay for those MPs who fail to attend the sitting of the National Assembly. The ANC needs to issue a final written warning to its MPs, including ministers, who are too self-indulgent to bother to perform their parliamentary work." I close quote. Again, you can see Consortium has gone ahead and attacked the ANC in Parliament. Quite rightly so. They could have, if they felt strongly about the legislation, they could have stayed or got into their people or even onto the virtual platform. I was watching that virtual platform on that day, and no, most of the ANC MPs had gone AWOL, disappeared. I don't know what happened to them, but they still have 52% of the House. If they were present, they could have passed the legislation. It was a good thing that what happened was the Democratic Alliance walked out. We were followed by the Freedom Front, but we walked out and kiboshed that legislation, I'm pleased to announce. Well, we have another problem. The amendments to the compensation fund. That did go through. It was sad to see that it went through, but one thing that was successful is that when they proposed the amendments to the compensation fund, they proposed banning third parties. You might have remembered in one of my previous posts, I talked about that. And the only way that you could have a banning of the third parties was done through amendment to the legislation. Just quickly as a recap, what happens is the compensation fund is dysfunctional. They don't pay the doctors, the hospitals, and they wouldn't want to see patients. What happened was a group of third parties said to the doctors, the hospitals, the medical personnel, "We will buy your invoices at a discount and we'll pay you for the discounted rate so you can see the patients who have been injured in terms of their work injuries. And we will in turn claim the full amount from the compensation fund," which they did. And when the compensation fund didn't pay them, as they don't normally pay, they then went ahead and sued because they had millions owing. And they were successful. So the minister wanted to outlaw this and put it into an amendment where he wanted to outlaw payment to third parties. Well, of course, what happened was we had warned the ministry that people will go to the Constitutional Court. You can't legislate a whole group of people who can't earn business out of this. And so the minister, almost wisely but bullied, took that clause out of the compensation fund amendments. But what did he do? He duplicitly then added it into the regulations, in other words, through the back door. There was a hue and a cry about that, and the whole medical profession's been screaming. And we've understood now that those amendments have been withdrawn. They did issue a government gazette. It looks like they've withdrawn it. until after the elections. They don't want to upset the entire medical profession. They don't want a court case on their hands. But I have no faith. I believe they're going to bring those amendments back into the regulations. Just as an aside, we're waiting for our new Chief Justice. That'll be interesting. At least the President has put together an advisory panel to advise him on that Chief Justice. We're waiting for that announcement. It's going to take a few weeks still before we can have a proper announcement. Zondo Commission, that's been given a little bit more time to try and wrap up. I'm pleased about that. Although we haven't seen any prosecutions as yet, at least what we are seeing is that people are being named and shamed, and hopefully there will be prosecutions in the future. Don't hold your breath, but I hope so. And then finally, we've had the quarterly report. They do a quarterly report on employment in South Africa. It's got worse. And sure enough, it will get worse in the future. So thank you for listening to me. It's Michael Bagram, Democratic Alliance, Labour spokesperson. This is Sunday, the 3rd of October, 2021. Thank you.